Mr. Carney, you are pitching your wagon to a party that is really struggling right now. Why don't you
Look, well, first thing, I have a couple of simple rules.
This isn't really going well for Carney, and this is why.
Mark Carney made a rare appearance at a press conference during the Liberal caucus retreat. For many Canadians, it is their first view of who Mark Carney is and how he operates.
Let's take a look.
Thank you all for coming. I'll just say a few words and then pleased to take your questions. Look, and let me start by saying it's an honor to accept this role as chair of this new task force on economic growth for the Prime Minister, for the leader. It comes at, in my view, a decisive time for our economy, for our country. You know, the world is becoming a more dangerous and divided place, and at the same time, the global economy is being transformed. Every major economy is accelerating their energy transition, and being low carbon is becoming a key driver of competitiveness. We're just at the start of a revolution driven by AI in every sector, every economy, every company. We can no longer rely on the world's rules-based trading system. We have to become an essential trading partner. We can't win an industrial policy arms race. And in all of that environment, we have to grow, both in the short term and for the long term.
So a couple things right off the bat. He says he's honored to have this position as chair of this economic task force. So in our previous video, we talked about the fact that Mark Carney is being paid by the Liberal Party and not by the government of Canada.
Well, if he's chair of a task force, does that not mean he's being paid by the taxpayer?
Allegedly not. So, you know, the question is WTF?
How can the Liberal Party hire like somebody for the position of chair of a Liberal task force, like of an economic task force? This makes no sense to me.
Right. And he says, well, it's for the Prime Minister. Well, if it's for the Prime Minister, then that sounds like it's for the federal government.
Right.
Not the leader of the Liberal Party.
Right. I mean, if it was for the party, it would be something like the chief electoral strategist, right? That's a party job. It would be like the treasurer. That's a party job. This makes no sense.
Yeah. Like if he was the chair of the economic strategy task force for the Liberal Party of Canada, you can kind of see that, but even that, it's a little sketchy. He's saying right here, it's for the Prime Minister. And if it's for the Prime Minister, then it's for the federal government. So
they're skirting the rules.
Yeah. And this is where we pointed out in our previous video as well that Michael Barrett has a big problem with this, and rightly so. Michael Barrett is the ethics critic for the Conservative Party. So one of his jobs is to call out BS and potential ethics problems when he sees them, and this is clearly one of them.
We need real policies. We need solutions, not slogans. Action, not indifference. And I was very pleased by the discussion in the room, the ideas and the energy of the members, and look forward to working with them to develop the strategy. And I look forward, and I may regret this, I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Haha, so cheeky.
You know, at least he comes across exactly as what he's sold as. A Davos elite, high-rolling business guy. That's what he comes across as. There's not a lot of personality there.
I was going to say, he's got the personality of a wet dishcloth.
And
probably the same amount of culture, too.
Yeah. Probably. The irony is, for those that don't know, is that Mark Carney grew up in the Northwest Territories. But that doesn't come across. It certainly doesn't come across here. But it doesn't, I don't know. Personality doesn't matter when it comes to doing a job. Attitude is what matters. Capability is what matters. But the job is what's in question.
Right, because how could he be paid by the Liberal Party, but it sounds like he's doing work for the Canadian government?
Right. And it doesn't make sense.
Because, I mean, let's take, for example, Max Valiquette, who is the, he's kind of like the social media guy for
Director
Trudeau.
of Communications.
Yeah, but that's a government job. He's doing work for the federal government of Canada. It benefits the Liberal Party. It's part of their strategy, but it's work for the government of Canada. Therefore, he's on the government payroll.
Well, and one of the main reasons probably why he isn't on the payroll of the federal government is because people would be saying, well, that rule's already failed, Justin.
Well, you mean that why Carney's not on the government payroll?
Yeah, that rule's already failed by someone named Chrystia Freeland. And, you know, you kind of have to get elected to do that job.
But, I mean, they can have advisors and things outside of cabinet, but they're typically paid for by the taxpayer and are accountable to the taxpayer.
And are also subject to the ethics laws within the government of Canada.
Right. So are Trudeau and the Liberals trying to skirt the ethics laws?
Wouldn't be the first time. Randy.
Randy! Have you been hanging out with Randy?
What is in it for you, Mr. Carney? You are pitching your wagon to a party that is really struggling right now. Why don't you call
Look, well, first thing, I have a couple of simple rules. One, if the Prime Minister of Canada asks me to do something, I will do it. I will serve to the best of my ability. Secondly, you know, I'm interested. I have some experience in these issues, and I'm interested in helping our country to grow. I'm interested in doing something, not being something. And this is a decisive time for our economy. These issues have to be tackled head on. And as I said at the outset, I'm honored to be part of this process.
I'm interested in doing something, not being something. Sounds like a slogan, Mark.
It does sound like a slogan.
Thought we were interested in solutions, not slogans, as you said like 2 minutes earlier. But nobody believes you.
Nobody believes you here, man.
And nobody believes Justin Trudeau. Nobody believes Chrystia Freeland. Nobody really believes anything that any of the Liberal Party has to say anymore. And that's kind of the problem and kind of the reason they're in the situation that they are, is that they have gaslit Canadians for the last 9 years to the point where even their base doesn't believe them anymore. So that's the issue. So now you're bringing in, like, this is a very weird thing to kind of do.
Well, especially for Carney, because why would he want to sully his name with the Liberal brand? Because the Liberal brand is going down in flames. And why would he want to hop on that ship that's going down, right?
Well, and strategically, it's also kind of a bizarre move as it relates to thinking what the Conservatives are going to do. Because one of the main worries that the media says that the Conservatives have is that their whole platform has been built around Justin Trudeau. Just inflation, Justin Trudeau, 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 Trudeau. And if Trudeau were to leave the party, the assumption is the Conservatives would have a problem, because if you remove the entire focus of your campaign and where you're directing all the blame, then that may cause a problem for what the messaging may be coming out of the Conservatives.
Well, I think that may be true to a certain degree. I mean, we know people personally who have been part of the Liberal Party who have said, we're not voting Liberal, we're not voting at all in the next election because of Justin Trudeau. If Trudeau is gone, I imagine they'll vote again. Now, I imagine there's more people than just them that hold that attitude, but I don't think it's going to be everybody. I think you will see some people come back to the Liberals to vote for the Liberals, but I think by and large, most Canadians have their minds made up.
Well, as I was saying, in terms of the strategic misstep, this is where it is. So Trudeau bringing in Carney now, assuming Trudeau's not going to step down, this now puts Mark Carney into the crosshairs of the Conservatives, where they can start to brand him themselves.
And they've already begun doing that.
Right. So, and they kind of poked at this throughout the last session. You heard carbon tax Carney a couple times. So now having him with a more direct role in the Liberal Party, it opens him up to a lot more attacks from the Conservatives before the guy even has the opportunity to run a leadership campaign and become leader of the Liberal parties, which is normally when a party would launch its attacks on a person like that. So they are telegraphing Mark Carney's involvement with the Liberal Party in the future by moving with this route. So it's a bit strange.
Well, and no doubt Michael Barrett's going to be very vocal about the fact that Carney is on the party payroll, but doing work for the government.
Well, and I guarantee you, well, I can't guarantee you. If I was on the committee, I would guarantee you that that most likely Michael Barrett is going to be introducing motions to bring Mark Carney into the ethics committee to start talking about his vested interests elsewhere.
Oh, that's going to be amazing. I can't wait to see Barrett go head to head with Carney. So, that's going to be beautiful.
Well, and this is the thing. The irony. Mark Carney is not a minister of cabinet, correct?
Correct.
Ministers are immune from having to appear at committee.
Right. You can ask them to come, but you cannot summon them.
So Mark Carney is not a minister.
Correct.
So therefore he is not immune from coming to committee.
Well, from being summoned to committee.
Right.
That's right.
And it would look very bad if they actually had to summon Mark Carney to committee.
Yeah, especially if he does have political aspirations and wants to be prime minister.
Remember, transparency, people. So it's gonna be very interesting. The chess moves that have come into play and come into focus are gonna be really, really interesting to watch over the next month.
Look, I think that the story for today and the task that I've taken on is it's a big task, it's an important task, but I'm a catalyst in a much broader effort of those members of Parliament in that room, effort of other Canadians. Look, these issues, those who really think about our future are increasingly seized with these issues. And the question is, how do you translate those to the best ideas, the best policies that are going to make real differences for Canadians?
This isn't really going well for Carney. And this is why. Because again, he says, I'm just a catalyst for the work of the members of Parliament that are working in the House of Commons. That doesn't sound like you're working only for the Liberal Party.
Right. You should be on the taxpayer payroll, as much as I hate to say it, but he should be a public servant and he should be subject to our ethics laws.
100%.
The Liberal Party on the carbon tax. You have said, it had done its purpose up to a time. Will you be advising them to make any changes on carbon tax?
I think the fundamental, sometimes what happens with these issues around is that the focus misses an important other aspect, which is that, as I said a moment ago, being low carbon is going to be a determinant of whether we can create jobs, whether we can sell our products in the United States, in Europe, around the world. We have to help our companies become more competitive. There's a huge range of things that the federal government can do, many of which they are doing. Huge range of things that other companies, the provincial governments and other their stakeholders need to do in order for that to be the case. And we need to be clear-eyed about not the challenge, but the scale of the opportunity, because no country is in a better position for this. Make one last point. These issues, the issues around being low carbon, is an issue for our manufacturing sector. It's an issue for whether or not we're going to lead in information technology. It's an issue for whether we are going to retain our ability to trade into the major markets. And we are best placed of any country in the world to do that, but we have to be clear-eyed about it and move forward.
So I believe the question was around, are you going to be recommending any changes to the carbon tax or anything like that? And I found it very interesting in that his entire answer was focused on the corporate aspects of society. which would make sense. Nothing in his answer said anything about, well, you know, Canadians have to be sucking it up and paying the carbon tax. Even though he actually has a book out that he says that the carbon tax is basically a model that other countries should follow. But when you're answering these questions, it sounds pretty silly when you're trying to say that, oh, well, you know, Canadians, you know, being taxed to death under the carbon tax, that's the best way, you know, to move our economy ahead.
You want to know the best way to move the economy ahead? Nuclear power. I don't know why we do not have more nuclear plants in this country. Canada has the best and the safest nuclear reactors in the world. And again, it's a bad PR problem that government doesn't want to build more nuclear reactors because everybody freaks out.
Well, and even if you're going to say, well, we're going to put some sort of tax or penalty on people that are using gasoline engines. Even if you're going to do that, there has to be an alternative that's reasonable and cheaper.
And viable, because electric vehicles do not do well in Canadian winters.
So their first problem, if they wanted to do this, which they can't, is they would need an alternate fuel source to gasoline that is mass produced in these cars, that is going to be capable of withstanding Canadian winters and the long distances that Canadians have to drive. So if you're going to do that, then there has to be massive incentives to get people to move to that, and then you can put penalties on the people that are driving death. Now, I'm not in favor of doing that because it's an affordability problem. So then you have to say, all right, so we can't do the penalties. Now you're coming back to, oh, look, Pierre Poilievre's platform, where he's saying you don't penalize people, especially when they're in an affordability crisis. What you do is you incentivize the new technology. So currently, electric cars as a permanent solution across Canada is a disastrous approach.
Well, and consumers don't want them. I mean, besides the logistical stuff, consumers just don't want them.
Well, number one, they're very expensive, and there's no way the average Canadian is going to be able to afford one. And number two, our electricity grid can't withstand it.
That's why we need nuclear power. Or maybe nuclear powered cars. What do you think? They've got subs. Why not cars?
Sure, why not? Get on it, Carney.
Did they ask you to run in the 2 by-elections?
The conversation, this is the outcome of the conversation I had with the Prime Minister, which is to take on this important role. Let's be clear about the role, David, to your question.
Okay, very important if you missed it. So the question was around, did he have a conversation with the Prime Minister around like joining cabinet as the finance minister or something like that? And Mark's response to that was, this is the output of that conversation. I don't know if he meant to slip up or not, but to me, that was a major slip up. Because that means, to me, that they had a conversation over how Mark would join their government. And evidently, Mark didn't want to actually join the government in an official capacity. Trudeau probably wanted him to, because it would just add to the credibility of the Liberal government. But evidently Carney doesn't want to disclose things, wants to keep his money, wants to keep his investments, doesn't want to have to worry about bending over backwards to comply with the Ethics Act.
Well, and I think he's still keeping his current job as well, right?
Yeah, he's still the chair of Brookfield. So,
yeah.
and
I mean, you wouldn't be able to do that if you were a minister. You have to declare everything within 60 days of your appointment to the ethics commissioner. And then the ethics commissioner tells you what you have to divest.
And you literally cannot have another job.
Yeah.
So, and then lastly, he, as much as I'm confused as to why he's getting this close to the Liberals, he's probably thinking, well, this is enough distance between myself and the Liberal government. I can just say that I recommended these things and they didn't follow it.
But why do it in an official capacity? If he's been doing this all along with Trudeau and Freeland, why come on in an official capacity? See, none of this makes sense.
And I think what it is to kind of introduce him to the rest of the Liberal caucus, because in the inevitable outcome of the election, he's going to be I guess, one of the main candidates for the Liberal Party. Like, it's very strange.
I'm wondering if they are just going to proceed with election with Trudeau as leader, and then, I don't mean immediately, I just mean like eventually we'll go to election and Trudeau will be leader. And then Carney's going to run in one of the Liberal strongholds and win, and then be in government possibly as opposition, and then they will vote, like the party will vote whether or not to have him as the party leader. That's what I'm wondering if their end goal is.
He may end up running in Papineau, which is Trudeau's riding.
That's a good point, because I was going to say no initially, but I think possibly what could happen, and this happened in the Ontario election a few years ago. It was a few years. It was just like 2 or 3 years ago, where the leaders of the parties ran and lost badly. And then immediately after the election, like the same night or the day after, they resigned. And then the party chose their new leaders.
So we'll see.
I'm an outsider. I'm providing a perspective, gathering opinions from interested Canadians, and feeding them in so that we can have the best possible growth strategy that puts people first, grows our economy, not just in the short term, but in medium, long term, in a world that is fundamentally changing. But look, what I understand, my career, if you look at it, has been in and around the interface between policy and the economy, the public and private sector. And what's animated throughout has been to get the private sector to work to the objectives of people through, whether it was when I was doing financial reform as governor of the Bank of Canada, with the financial crisis, whether it's my work internationally on climate change, it's to ensure that we get the private sector to provide what people want, what Canadians want. That's the issue now.
So one thing that the Conservatives are constantly bringing up when Mark Carney is talking about climate change, and he's talking about the carbon tax, and he's talking about what Canadians want, is that it's very interesting that the company that he works for ended up purchasing a pipeline out in the rest of the world, but he was opposed to any pipelines that were being built in Canada. So isn't it interesting that when it comes to Canada, pipelines are bad, but when it comes to pipelines outside of Canada, pipelines are good? Isn't that interesting?
And I'll say it again, that what I find the most interesting is that these politicians don't change their behaviors when it comes to climate change. I mean, look at the Liberal cabinet retreat, which was at one end of the country in Halifax, and then the Liberal caucus retreat was in Nanaimo at the complete opposite end of the country. So obviously you had to fly at least 37 people from one place to the other, and then everybody else had to go into Nanaimo. And then they're going to be in Ottawa next week. Most of them are probably going to be flying in. I mean, if climate change was as severe as they say it is, they would not be flying all over the country like that. They expect us to change our behaviors, but they won't change theirs. So at best, they're hypocrites, and at worst, they're not telling the truth.
Well, and let's bring up one more aspect. If they were really that concerned, where would they be holding these meetings?
Central.
In
Toronto or Ottawa, because they're all going to end up in Ottawa anyways.
No, but in Toronto, because that's where the lion's share of their MPs are elected. So having it in Nanaimo, there's hardly any Liberals in Western Canada.
Yeah, so they all have to go west.
So
just to all go back to Ottawa.
Yeah, all of them. All of them. Why are they holding it in Nanaimo? Because Nanaimo's great this time of year. That's why they're in Nanaimo. So they don't give a damn about their carbon footprint that each of them are paying for in flying out there. So, to Tanya's point, give me a break.
That's the issue now. At an even higher level, because these huge changes are coming. As I said at the outset, the world's more divided. It's certainly more dangerous. We can flip that around and take advantage of it. Okay, last question.
Why do you feel that you can help the party better in this way than presenting yourself as a candidate?
What matters for Canadians, let's be frank, it's not a party, it's not an individual, it's what happens on the ground. It's whether the country is moving forward to their priorities. This is where I can help right now in order to move our country forward. Look, it's an exciting time. It is an exciting time for Canada if we seize it. And this is about seizing it. And I'll finish with this. I'm pleased and honored, not just by the Prime Minister's confidence, but I look forward to working with Minister Freeland, Minister Champagne, Minister Ng, and the rest of the caucus in developing this too.
Well, I'm looking forward to see what Mr. Barrett and the rest of the Ethics Committee has to say about this appointment.
I would laugh my butt off. It's not going to happen, but I would laugh my butt off if in like a matter of weeks the government fell. Because this doesn't mean anything.
It's just like one more complicating factor in this whole mess.
But it would just be funny because, like, you know, they're doing all this pomp and making it official, and he's you know, doing this presser. But wouldn't it be just hilarious if the government fell in a couple of weeks and then an election happened and then the Liberals got trounced, and it's like, wow, great that you brought on Carney, wouldn't it?
Well, and it could happen because, as we've said before, politics is extremely volatile right now without that NDP coalition agreement. So we're just going to have to wait and see what happens next.